program, the challenges, but also the success. I think I really appreciate that the most in this last couple of hours here with all of you. Hearing about your experience, about the success of this program. And I, like with any government program, there's going to be some really challenges, but I want to hear more about this. It's exactly that. It would be very helpful for us. Comment? Oh, all right, there you go. Thank you. So I think one thing that I wanted to know, like we heard today a lot about a need for clarity, consistency, and sustainability. Right? A lot about there's a need for that. Some folks like that, some folks don't. But wanted to know that as part of what's mandated and established is that we're required to make some changes to the program's long-term changes. And we're working to make these changes with you all together as part of this. By March 21st, 2027, we're supposed to develop some standardized processes and procedures for the program. So what does this mean for you? It means that whether you live in San Diego or Sacramento, whether you're served by one regional center today and you're going to move and be served by another later on, you experience the same enrollment process, the same approach to individual budgets and spending plans, and the same access. We've heard from many of you that that the experience of joining self-determination program can vary widely depending on which regional center that serves you. And some of you have waited for months, while others have an opportunity to have a better opportunity to move through really quick. And I think for the most part, that doesn't make sense. Right? I want to make sure that there's a consistency approach to that. Some have received robust transition support, while others have been left to navigate the system by themselves. That too doesn't make sense. This inconsistency is not, for me personally, it's not acceptable, and we want to make some changes to it. Also, one thing that we're looking to do is, by August 21st, it's coming shortly already, can't believe that's already here. August 21st, 2026 is to provide some guidance on what's the term cost effectiveness mean for all the programs, including both self-determination too. We recognize that the term has caused a lot of confusion and frustration, and sometimes conflicts. And we recognize that without clear definition, it can feel arbitrary and subjective. And that, to me, is not fair for you all. So we want to work with your input to develop that, and have a better understanding of what it truly represents in supporting the value of community life. So once we establish these definitions, we'll update the regional centers, we'll update the policies, and bring transparency to the decision-making process. What also that we're working on is establishing some parameters around service rates. We know that when individuals and families have the flexibility to hire their own staff, purchase their own services, the question naturally arises about appropriate rates. How much should we pay for a job coach? What's a reasonable cost for transportation? What about specialized services? Those are some of the questions. We will conduct a community engagement meeting to get for your inputs. Like I said, I'm very committed to working with you all and getting your thoughts and your ideas on this. To develop some of these guidelines on rates when using public funds. Keep in mind, this is a public program, right? We're using taxpayers' dollars. So we recognize that this work requires balance, ensuring that there's fair compensations for providers, while stewarding taxpayer resources responsibly. But as I have pointed out, we can't do this without the voices at the table. I want to hear from you about this. One thing too that's really important is that we've heard from you about personal intent classification and how it relates to staff support for individuals in the self-determination program. One thing that we're doing at the moment, like I said, we're waiting for the feds at the moment. Our understanding is that they're working on some new rules around this, which we hope to have released in the next calendar year. We're tracking this, and to the extent that when it comes out, once we have clarity, we will provide information to y'all and work with you to figure out what the impact and implications are. And to the extent that we need to make any policy changes, we'll also do that. But like I said, I want to continue to emphasize this with the community. Beyond SDP, we are working, we're having some important conversations with the state councils and also with other partners. We believe that individuals with IDD should have the opportunity to make their own decisions. So we're thinking about how do we plan and engage with regional centers, judicial systems, healthcare professionals, educators, and the community members in strengthening FDM as an option, a viable option. So I want to know this is a work that's in the early stage, but committed to working with this, with the council, with the community on how do we go about and outreach and work with the community about this option instead of utilizing it to the extent that as it promoting the program for the most part. One thing that I also want to note is I was going to speak to the budget, but I'll let Aaron take care of that. That next year is a really critical time for us. California will be electing a new governor. So with new leadership always brings changes, and changes brings opportunity, but also it brings uncertainty. Right? We do know we'll likely see some changes in the governor's office. Of course, now the governor's coming in and bringing his own people, and also at the same time at the Health and Human Resources Agency. So the Secretary of Health and Human Resources will also likely change. We might see changes at the department. The director is in appointed position, so is my role. But for the most part, what I want to note that it's critical for us to engage now more than ever, because the policies that we establish and put in place, the clarity that we create, the systems that we standardize will provide stability regardless of any changes at the governor's office or the changes that are forthcoming. So it's critical for your continued advocacy to ensure that this happens regardless of the next administration, and to ensure that they understand that your needs and your values are accounted for. So I want to leave off with that. Like I said, I appreciate being here today. Appreciate the work that you guys do. Looking forward to continuing working on. You play a key role in this program, and I'm not the expert you are, but at the end of the day, what's important is that we work together, and I'm committed to doing that as part of this thing.
Thank you very much. Can I hand it over to Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Aaron. Hi, Aaron.
That's pretty good. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Aaron.
Thank you so much for coming back. I know at the beginning of the day, Judy said, please come back to the session. There's a lot of important and new information, and we hope to deliver on that. So, rewarding you for coming back by giving you good information. We just heard a whole lot. Yang, thank you so much for detailing out specific, intentional, clear pieces of the program that can be addressed, can be improved. So thank you for that. There's one kind of special sauce piece we're going to need to make all that happen. It's money. Anybody hearing about what's going on with money lately? There's a lot that's happening. The topic of this session is challenges. Let's talk about money. I want to break it out into two pieces because there's a lot that's happening, and I want to make it as clear as possible through all the complexity. One piece is the state piece and their money. The other piece is the federal government and their money. And there's changes happening in both places. So let's start off with the state. What's happening with the state? We are in an interesting place that we're in the first year of a 2-year budget. It's the first time the legislature and the governor have adopted a 2-year budget, and they did it because they knew there were deficits. They usually do a 1-year budget. They said, if we do a 1 year, we know there's a deficit the next year, let's just do a 2-year and address the deficits now. So we're in the first year, and they're watching the projections of dollars come in, and there's something good happening. Month over month, there's about $1 billion or $2 billion more above what they thought would be paid in tax revenues. This is good. The challenge, in someone projection, said by the time they do the next budget, it may be a $20 billion additional more money than they thought they would have. Okay, that sounds pretty good. However, there's a couple of things that are driving costs. One is in our own system. We see year over year that there is additional people coming in really high numbers. We also see the governor and the legislature meeting their commitment to us and funding it. $1 billion more each year. Last year was $3.5 billion. So I'm expecting we'll see more people next year. I'm also expecting the governor and legislature will meet their commitment to us. So that costs more. We're seeing those same increases in cost drivers and IHSS. Then there's something else going on. The federal government changed a couple of rules which is going to cost the state more money. One is they changed how the state can raise its money, to how it fundraises, what it taxes to pay for Medicaid funded services. It's called the MCO, provider tax. A bunch of jargon. It just means the federal government cut off about $8 billion each year of money the state's going to have to find from somewhere else. Additionally, they changed the rules on how much the states have to pay for CalFresh and SNAP supports, food supports, so the state has to pay more. So we see smart planning of a budget, a deficit budget, then we see additional dollars coming in over what was expected. Then we see other things that we are losing some tax dollars, we're gonna have to spend more. So where does it all come out for just the state picture? Actually, about 2 hours ago, we saw the first snapshot of that. There's an entity called the Legislative Analyst Office, and they are created by the legislature to advise the legislature, and they said our best estimate from all the things that cost more and the more money that's coming in, we're projecting an $18 billion deficit. A little sobering, a little shocking. Now what happens is next week, the Department of Finance will tell departments, all right, we want you to cut by this much or this percentage. So now the next thing happens, which is, well, I guess the finance has to come up with their own version. They may agree, they may disagree, but we will see just in next week, we'll see more of this develop. Okay, that's what's happening with money at the state level. What's happening with money at the federal level? On July 4th of this year, the president signed legislation called HR 1. Anybody else heard of it by a different name?
We don't use the internet.
Okay. Something like big something or other? Okay. I see those as marketing terms. I won't use them. I will use the proper name for it, which is HR 1. What did HR 1 actually do? It cut taxes by $4.5 trillion over 10 years. It spent some more, it cut some spending. Overall, there was a net decrease in federal spending by $1.5 trillion over 10 years. And it let the federal government borrow more money on its own credit cards. Pretty cool ability, just raise your credit limit if you borrow some more money. They did that by $5 trillion to pay for what they spent. Now, out of the money that was cut, we saw huge cuts in Medicaid dollars, we saw huge cuts in food supports, $1 trillion over 10 years for Medicaid and healthcare. We could get into what's Medicaid and what does it mean to us, but the most important thing we know is it's the dollars that pay for regional center services, pay for the supported decision, the self-determination program, and pays for IHSS. Now, the impacts. This action, it wasn't just about budgets, it was about values. And when we look at how much was cut versus how much was cut, what happened with taxes versus what happened with spending, it's really clear. It was about tax cuts. That was the value. And when we look at where the tax cuts were going, there's a couple of policy pieces. One is that the president had some tax cuts that happened in his first term. They were about to expire. There was a real commitment by the president during his election to continue those. And they accomplished that. But they also added some more tax cuts. When we look at who benefits from the tax cuts, though, it's really the richest 20% of Americans get 72% of what was cut. We look at the poorest 20%, it's 0%. Now, 0% doesn't mean $0. In fact, estimate the poorest 20% will get about $40 each. The richest 20% will get about $66,000 each. So we can see that it's a piece of legislation, but it's really about priorities and values. Now, to pay for these tax cuts, there's going to have to be cuts to other things. And the biggest thing they can cut is Medicaid and healthcare funding. Not because they don't like it, but because it is the area that has the most discretion, the most flexibility. There's other parts in the federal budget that are mandated, they're locked in, they have to do it. So they go to what's called discretionary. The biggest discretionary pot is Medicaid. In doing this, they didn't just cut it. They didn't say, let's cut it by $1 trillion. They made a number of policy changes. Of those policy changes, one of them was work requirements. And the work requirements, they really exempted people with disabilities. And I've been in meetings in California where leadership in California is doing all that they can to make sure it's as easy on us as possible. They're using data sets, they're using technology to include as many people into the exemption, so we don't have to come forward and prove it. So they're using Medicaid service codes. This is smart. I appreciate the leadership that we're seeing. So these cuts, they're going to roll out over the next year, year and a half. They haven't happened yet. They haven't happened, but they're going to. So keep in mind as we think about challenges and funding, is what's happening with the state and what's happening with the federal government.
Okay.
I got called time.
Oh, wow, that was impressive. Okay, I'm gonna go next. We just found out that unfortunately Cynthia Williams can't be here. We literally just found this out. I'm gonna try to speak a little bit about what she was gonna say, but sort of add it on to what I was gonna talk about. So, as you just heard by the uplifting conversation from Erin, things are gonna get really bad over the next few years and into the next decade. You know, people with disabilities essential services and healthcare are going to be cut by the Congress and the President by $1 trillion. And these cuts are compounded in so many different ways that disabled lives are affected, not just monetarily, but the fact that the Department of Justice eliminated their disability rights section, that the Department of Education is being decimated, so special education services will have no oversight. The Administration on Community Living was also dissolved, which are responsible for things like DRC's funding and the state cap. They still exist, but in a different name and not the kinds of people we would necessarily want to get. I'll make that statement. So as the mother of Joshua, who's 28 years old, who moved out of his home last year, which was an amazing success, he relies on Medicaid-funded services and healthcare for his entire life. He receives his healthcare through Medi-Cal. He receives his round-the-clock services funded by Regional Center, the Self-Determination Program, and in-home supportive services, or IHSS. All of those services receive federal funding and will be dramatically impacted by these cuts. I'm pretty pissed off, I have to tell you. I feel really betrayed. Like, we moved my son out in May 9th. I will always, we call it our Freedom Day, May 9th, 2024. And, you know, we were setting him up for an amazing life. And now we're like really worried as we get closer to retirement age, as his dad and I, and, you know, like, if things get really cut back, this is going to seriously impact him. And I know that we are privileged. I know that there are people who can't even afford a 5% cut to their services. And I believe that cutting Medicaid is going to kill people. I absolutely know that people will die because of these Medicaid cuts. I am certain of it. So we know that it's unclear how Californians could react to this. I know this, even though Yankee couldn't possibly say it out loud, that there are conversations happening in state government offices about how they're gonna handle this, these cuts. Remember though, by the way, that these cuts have not gone into effect yet. So if you're hearing from your regional center or from a service provider that they're cutting your services because of Medicaid cuts, that's wrong, and you need to speak to DDS about that, because they agree that that's wrong. Or call DRC as well, absolutely.
State Council Medicaid Watch.
Yeah, so our policymakers at the state level, our state legislature, the governor, or at and other policymakers, they have a couple of choices. They can throw millions of people off of healthcare and reduce their services substantially, or they can increase revenues. And of course, I like the latter idea. And what does increased revenues look like? So there's various options. I'm not sure if all of you know this, but there are actually giant employers out there who do not keep their employees on full time. They put them on 29 hours a week, so they're not required to provide them with health insurance. Walmart is one of the big bad employers like that. And so we think that they should be penalized because you know what they do? They offer benefits counseling to their employees to put them on Medi-Cal and to use our Medicaid dollars when the employer should be paying for that. So I'm saying right now that DVU is going to absolutely support the various ways that we can increase revenues so that the cuts from the federal government will not be as bad. The other thing that I can say is that people in the disability community are not informed and sometimes they're misinformed. We try to do our best, as so many other organizations, particularly the state council, who were quite heroic in the spring, of having meetings all around the state to tell people what these cuts are going to mean. But I'll tell you, so remember that the HR 1 was signed by the president on July 4th. And the next day, I got an email from a major disability rights organization in New York that said, great news, the proposed provisions that would have most directly harmed people with disabilities were removed from the final version of the federal budget and people with disabilities are protected. That's information people are sharing. I mean, this is a very large disability group. So the other thing that I don't want you to hear, there are some members of Congress who are saying you're fine. Like, we met with all the members of Congress around this issue, and we had some of them say things to us like, you're gonna be fine. People with disabilities are not impacted by these cuts. It is not possible that we are not impacted by these cuts. Every single community that relies on Medicaid will be impacted. That is a certainty. Because it's not like the state of California, who believes in healthcare for all, is going to say, we're going to save all the money for the developmental disability community and everybody else, good luck. We know they're not going to say that. So my goal here is to get you involved in our efforts to fight back. The first thing I'm going to say is we cannot do this alone. We cannot be the disability community circling our wagons and saying, cut everybody else, but not us. I will not be part of that discussion, and I hope that you guys are not either. We at DVU have joined with people like Cynthia at United Domestic Workers, which is the IHSS union in Orange County, and Service Employees International Union, SEIU, around there. They represent, I'm a member of SEIU, 2015. Is anybody else here a member? Okay, there should be way more hands up. You guys need to be joining the unions. It's critical to get informed, stay informed, and do something about it. We need to hold our elected officials accountable. We need to show up at next year's congressional town halls. Every single member of Congress is up for re-election next year. We need to show up to these town halls and say, what are you doing about the Medicaid cuts? I'm a person with disability, or I have a child with a disability who relies on Medicaid. What are you going to do to change things? And then if you hear somebody say, well, we're not going to really pledge to restore the funding, tell all your friends and family. For those of you who live in Orange County, you have some really big races coming up next year, and you need to pay attention. And then finally, I'll just say, because they're telling me to stop talking, is that we also next year, you heard, we have a governor's election. And we live in a wonderful state. I love California, and we have a lot of amazing candidates running for governor. Very few of them are talking about disability issues. And so we need to be asking them at their town halls, at their public meetings, to talk about our issues, to say, what are you going to do about the self-determination program, which I promise you most of them will have never heard of it, but we need to be out there at all of these elections. And this, just finally, I'm going to say, the self-determination program, as you know, is at a critical juncture. A lot of things are going to change, and please stay informed. Join our SDP Connects, all of our meetings. Make sure you're on our mailing list, because we are going to be really active in the space and try to inform everybody and get you all involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Judy. I can't believe you made me go after you. Hi, everyone. I'm Vivian Hahn. I'm a senior policy attorney at Disability Rights California, where I'm part of their intellectual and developmental disabilities practice group. I also have a brother who has autism, has received regional center services almost all his life, and is in the self-determination program, and also just moved out into his own place earlier this year, and we'll have a chat about that some other time. But yes, it's a big deal. Thank you for having me here. I just cannot underscore enough what Judy was saying about not being able to do this alone going forward. These are difficult times, and that's an understatement. I want to share a little bit about a suggestion that I got last week. So last week, my colleague Sabrina Epstein and I accompanied two self-advocates on a round of visits at the legislature and with the Department of Finance and the Legislative Analyst Office. This was all part of a grant that Disability Rights California got from the California Endowment to do Medicaid advocacy. So one of the pieces of that grant was to take self-advocates around and to have them share their stories about why these supports and services are so critical. And one of the self-advocates was an AAC user. That was important to us to have that be very visible. But I was very surprised by what one person told us. And this is Jason Sisney. For those of you who don't know Jason Sisney, he has worked in the Assembly for a long time. He is the budget advisor to the Speaker of the Assembly. And he puts out on social media, he has a blog or a Substack where he's constantly giving people the most updated information about state revenues, right? Like, okay, here's what our budget situation looks like now based on taxes and what's coming in, et cetera. I was very surprised to hear him say that based on what he was seeing, he thought that state revenues were okay-ish enough such that he was actually more worried about the budget in January 2027 than he was about the budget in January 2026. Because he felt like there was just enough in the state budget this coming year so that the governor, who we know has other aspirations, he predicted that it was just enough so that the governor would not be forced to make the really, really hard budget decisions this upcoming year. Because it was in his interest to not have to do that, right, in a year when he is seeking a different platform more nationally. Unfortunately, what that means is that the bill will come due the following year, and the tough decisions will be kicked down the road to whoever succeeds Governor Newsom. And that governor will not have the same bag of tricks, right? And they really won't have any alternatives but to make some very, very difficult budget choices. And that's also the year that a lot of stuff from HR1 will be kicking into high gear. The first year won't even be the worst. In 2027, we'll be really feeling the effects, which is why he advised us, and his suggestion for Disability Rights California, and I think really the disability community was pretty much what Judy was saying, get in front of the gubernatorial candidates now. Because in 2027, whoever comes in as the new governor, they're gonna be faced with terrible, terrible decision points, and they'll have made a whole bunch of campaign promises to a whole bunch of other people already. He said, your goal is to be one of the campaign promises that's protected, right? So I think that that's critical. I think that what this requires is, as Judy was saying, none of us can do this alone. We have to work in coalition. We have to work in coalition. And so it's not just about the regional summer system. It's not just about disability. It's not just about self-determination or supportive decision making. We have to talk about the ways in which we intersect with housing, criminal justice, healthcare, the immigration community. We have to come together. Anything that involves other groups, other allies, we're stronger together. And so we need to support their issues, they support ours, and honestly, there are so many issues that are one and the same. So that is what I would encourage you to think about in terms of getting active. One of the other things in a time of austerity that I think we need to think about is, unfortunately, right, cost effectiveness, which Yang brought up earlier. Well, what are some things that, right, when times are tight and the budget is tight, what are some things that are more cost effective? You know, what's more cost effective and a smarter use of dollars? Things like natural supports, things that promote having people and individuals, other people, right, in a disabled person's life. That's cost effective because every friend, real friend, who's not a paid support person in somebody's life, that's cost effective. What else is cost effective? Supporting caregivers. Supporting caregivers who do so much unpaid work already. A little bit of support for a caregiver can mean the difference between that caregiver being able to keep going versus whatever. And lastly, employment. Employment, that's cost effective, right? People who work have a place to go, they're paying taxes, that's cost effective. What I'm saying is that there are opportunities, even in very grim times, to still keep advancing other things that we think are really important. I know I'm supposed to wrap up. Self-determination and supported decision-making. How are those cost-effective? Expenditures are cost-effective when they address people's needs and goals, right? The happier people are with their services, the more cost-effective they are. And that's far more likely to happen when you get to choose them, when you get to direct them, when you are heard, and you are saying, this is what I need in my life. That's a far better use of dollars than what somebody else thinks, right, should be spent on. So those are some of my thoughts. Thank you. Thank you for being part of this day. Thank you to Judy and to everyone at DVU and to the other panelists. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. We now have time for questions. I will call on people, so please raise your hand. Please keep your questions to about 1 minute so we can get to as many questions as we can. And we now, Vivian will go to you. Let's go to this gentleman right here in front.
So I run an adult day program, and I have a lot of connections with multiple programs who have 20, 30, 40, 50 plus clients in their program, and we all get together talking about how the SDP program has affected us and where we have navigated from dealing with FMSs and other agencies like that. I want to know, like, what should we do as a community to start moving forward with as an agency?
What we're advising right now is that the state council is that we're actually in a little bit of a window. We're in a window before things really start hitting. And during that window, we can invest in ourselves. We can get trainings on advocacy, on speaking to representatives. The state council provides trainings, DVU does. There's lots of options for trainings out there. The main point is that whether you're skilled at it, you're brand new at it, there's going to be something for you. So right now is the time to just invest in yourself, build the skills, because there's gonna come a point where DVU, others are gonna put out the call, and they're gonna need you to move into action. The other piece is that the State Council launched something called the Medicaid Watch. As Judy pointed out, there are entities that are saying, you heard about these Medicaid cuts, right? Well, what do you want cut? We're hearing that from regional centers. I'm only going to approve you for 1 month of speech therapy because of these cuts. None of that's real. So we launched a website called Medicaid Watch so that you can come tell us what's going on, and then we go and work with the department, work with that regional center to go say, hey, blow the whistle, this isn't right. So those are two things.
Tattling. We can help you tattle.
Okay, we have another question.
My name is Dominika Bednarska. I'm an SDP participant, and I'm also here representing my independent facilitator business called You Are In Charge. I guess my question is, my experience with SDP has been so transformative, and it was literally from not getting my needs met at all and barely making it day to day to now having an incredible time with my services where my needs are just met and I don't have to think about it. And it's not just that people will die from these cuts. I mean, I think people have already died from cuts like this, and people will continue to die. And I guess I just want to talk about like what you were saying, Vivian, meeting people's needs is cost effective. It's like the cost of not meeting people's needs is people die, is people get institutionalized, is people cannot hold their jobs any longer because they can't live independently. People become so depressed because they can't live the lives they want to live, that they take their own life. I mean, these are real consequences for people. And I don't know how to better effectively get that messaging across in the activism that we do around political appointees. And we really need to totally flip the House and the Senate and just really turn this around, because we don't all deserve to die because few people who have their hands in power have made these decisions that we're now all going to have to suffer from. So I don't know sort of what the answer is, but I would really like that to be part of the messaging, not just that this program is really great, people are happy, because happy is whatever. I mean, it's important, but it's a life or death situation for a lot of us if this program goes away.
Yeah, and I'm just going to piggyback on your amazing articulate comment there. You all probably know this, but the developmental services system in the state of California does not actually track individual outcomes. It is all about compliance. Like, you get paid as a traditional service provider if you showed up. Doesn't matter if you showed up and didn't help the person or didn't do your job. And actually, some people get paid and they don't show up, which is actually called fraud. But that is what the system has traditionally been about and still is today. And even with the self-determination program, we are not tracking outcomes, which is a problem. We need to be actually, in your annual IPPs, you should be telling your service coordinator all the amazing things that have happened in your life in the past year because you're in the self-determination program. And we need to track the improvements. I actually want to get a study done to compare people's lives in the self-determination program versus people in the traditional system and show that it's not just about happiness, that people are actually getting jobs more, or they're moving out, being more independent, having more friends in their lives, whatever their goals are, because of the SDP, and that currently is just not being done.
Can I add to that? That's very important for me as a policymaker to see that the positive outcome of the people that are in this program, right? And that, for me, I can use that information, that data, to say that, hey, we have a great program here. Look what happened to Tina. She's doing all this great thing. Her life has been changing significantly because of this program. So I encourage you all, as part of your IPP conversation, to show as part of the security team that, hey, this program that I'm participating, these are the changes that I've seen. And, that helps me justify the need for the program.
Going back to the comment, and thank you so much for sharing your story. I've been enjoying hearing it throughout the day. The comment about, lives are at risk. Okay, yes, and what happens to the lives that somehow find a way to make it through? The cuts that we're talking about are not only cuts to core services, they're cuts to our core values. This money goes from Congress to Medicaid to what we call the home and community-based services. This is services in a community, in our home. On October 24th, the study was released to say if there's a 10% reduction in funding to California's home and community-based services fund, we're going to see a 3% increase in people having to go into institutions, into nursing care. Now, okay, so Vivian did a great job of talking about cost effectiveness. What is the cost effectiveness of just 3% more going into institutional settings? Well, it would be everything they would have had to spend in the community plus another $1 billion. So not only we're going to have to move to institutional settings, which this whole entire system we could set up to stay out of, it's also going to cost more.
Hi, first of all, thank you, Judy, and everybody at DVU who put this together. I'm Kavita from Pragnya. I'm also a parent, and I wouldn't be standing here if it were not for the self-determination program. My daughter is universal. With her care team, for the first time, she's without her parents, and with a caregiver team who are willing to travel with her. I mean, it's hard to find that in the traditional model. And the self-advocate that Yang is aware of, who is for the first time traveling with her care team and is at Universal Studios. So thank you. So, well, that was more fun than being here for them. So my question is threefold. With regard to the self-determination program, I don't know if when you've gone through the data, majority of the people transitioning to self-determination are in 3 to 21 years of age. People 22 plus, I don't know how many of the self-advocates, we've heard some wonderful self-advocates who have talked about how it's been life-changing for them. There are many in adult residential facilities, and those individuals, how are we reaching out to them? How many of them are aware of the fact that there is something called self-determination? That in the way that they can understand how is this being made available, this information being made available to them, they probably may not want to be part of an adult residential facility where there could be a lesser spend on them in the self-determination program where they could lead a more meaningful life. So that's one question. It's regarding self-determination probably, that I wanted to know what kind of outreach efforts has the department, if you've not undertaken it, is there something that we can undertake? Second part, with regard to supported decision-making and also regional center services and self-determination, I want to bring the aspect of the immigrant community. I'm not talking about undocumented, I'm talking about legal immigrants in this country. People who are on H1s, L1 visas and these kind of visas, who've been waiting years and years. And now the directive that came out with regard to them being anybody with a disability, or for that matter, with any kind of a chronic condition being regarded as a public charge, it can affect their immigration situation. Here we are, boots on the ground, we're talking to people, and just a couple of months ago we were talking about it's not going to affect your immigration situation, and now we don't know, we're completely confused as to what to tell families. With regard to supported decision making, I was talking to Disability Rights just a few minutes ago. Parents are being asked to conserve their children because they could risk, if they're on H1 and H4 visas or dependent visas, they could be sent back. We had 6 people drop out of the supported decision-making conversation that we were having, who had to get to conserve their children because there was no other way that they could possibly continue to declare them as dependents on their H1 visas because it's been so long. So I wanted to bring that to your attention when you're talking about supported decision making, and be aware of it and see if there's any kind of advocacy being done at the federal level and also at the state level to address these conflicting pieces of information, because we don't know what to tell people. We're standing out there and we're talking to people, and it's very distressing when we're actually out there as life connectors and navigators. Just wanted to bring that to you, since you advocate and you're thought leaders and change makers, so.
I could take the first one and probably the second one too. So in context of outreach, on a large scale, we needed more outreach, not just for the self-determination, but just overall services that are being provided for regional service, right? From what I hear, the general public doesn't really know that we have a great system here compared to other throughout the states. We have an entitlement program through the Ladderman Act. So folks don't really know that, to be honest with you. That they're having challenges when they're going through the school system and not recognizing that there's another resources out there to support them. Happy to figure out ways we can do more outreach. I think for the most part, when it comes to the community here, unless you have somebody who you have experience with directly, you won't know that there's resources out there. So if there's opportunities to find more ways to tell the community about what is it that's available, happy to figure that out with you all. I'm not aware of a public outreach campaign, but I do know that the department has been working on doing more outreach to the community about the department, the programs that we serve, we have, and the community that we serve. And we will always strive to do that more because we think it's critical for us to share that information, share about what we do, and bring more of a sense of, like overall other programs that we have. Second question, remind me the second question. Immigration. Public charge is a difficult one. I'm not an immigration expert, so I do know that would be a very challenging one for folks for immigrants. I don't have a good response.
Yeah, I mean, I know I did immigrant rights before I did disability rights. So I can tell you that the public charge issue is a major priority of all of the immigration groups, like the National Immigration Law Center, that my husband is the chair of the board of. So I can tell you that it is a major priority. I'm also going to tell you that we have made no inroads on that issue. That the Trump administration absolutely will not budge on the public charge issue. But basically, to explain it, is that if somebody's trying to adjust their status, whether they have a work visa to become, to get their green card, or if they're undocumented to get their green card, if they have a disability, the federal government can flag them as not being able to support themselves, and therefore they are considered a public charge, and they cannot adjust their status. This, by the way, this public charge law has been here since the 1990s, and it's a horrible law, but it's basically not been that enforced, and now it is being enforced by the Trump administration. So yes, it's a really big problem. I also, just as long as we're talking about immigration, because I didn't have time to talk about this is a very scary time for immigrants. Regardless of whether you are here undocumented, whether you have papers, if you are a brown person, you are living in fear of being deported or being picked up by ICE, who, if you live in Los Angeles, they are roaming around our streets. And so we need to support the immigrant community here. We need to be if people are scared to leave their homes, we need to make sure they are getting food to these families. If people are afraid to leave their homes, we need to make sure that the services are being provided in the home for these people with disabilities. So, I mean, these are issues that I care very deeply about. I know that there are many representatives here from the Latino community in particular who ask for your support, and I feel obligated as a person of privilege to be able to back this community up.
And I'll say one more thing about immigration. Kavita, I wish that there were clear answers. We get asked this all the time, and we will turn to the Department of Healthcare Services or like the legislature, and they're also looking for clarity and answers. It's really difficult. Things like, you might be hearing terms like unsatisfactory immigration status when it comes to things like Medi-Cal. What is that? Is that like unless you're just a citizen, full stop, is my immigration status satisfactory or unsatisfactory? It's still not clear yet, and it keeps everyone suspended in the state of anxiety and fear, which is part of the point, but it's not helpful. So in some regards, like that is by design. I will say some things with immigration. Did you know that in last year's budget, and this snuck up on all of us, in last year's state budget in June, they actually cut funding for legal aid for immigration defense? They did. They slashed it. There was late budget action later in the fall that did something. I don't know that it made up necessarily, but they did something that was better. But I was just on a call earlier. The immigrant community, like the least we can do is not just preserve funding, but increase funding for legal aid for immigrant communities. Definitely for deportation defense and things like that, but also for help connecting immigrant communities and families with any service, any support that they need to keep their family together and to just keep going. So it's things like that fly under the radar, but these are additional things that you can do to support. And we will try to do better at DRC to lift those issues up more.
Okay, we have a, oh, was that? Yes, we do have a question. Jesse in the back.
Hello, I'm Jesse. I'm also a self-advocate. And right now I have a part-time job, but as Erin, you pointed out the statistics about disability and jobs, I'm also looking for a full-time job, and that statistic scares the living heck out of me. And because there's also, while I'm applying for jobs online, they have the whole check on if you have a disability, and I'm just curious how, if I check that yes, I do have a disability, that impacts me, even though it may not impact my job ability as much as others, what that could look like moving forward.
So let me first say, Jesse, it is illegal for them to ask in a job application if you have a disability. So if that, you can ask for accommodations, and you're not required to disclose your disability.
Yeah,
in the
it's
interview process.
optional.
Yes, it is optional. So, it is really up to each individual person on how they want to disclose their disability. Certainly, I believe if you require accommodations, once the job offer is there, you should request accommodations, for sure.
We have a question that's going to be translated in Spanish.
Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias, Yuri. Gracias, panelistas. Yo quiero hablar por mi comunidad latina. Soy madre. Mi hijo está en el 6º año de autodeterminación. Soy facilitadora independiente en mi comunidad latina y también soy directora de una organización de padres latinos. Yo pienso que hay una palabra que no se ha tocado para nada en esta conferencia, que es que el programa está reduciendo la disparidad.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you to the panelists. I'm speaking here on behalf of my community, the Latino community. My son is in the 6th year of SDP. I am an IAF. I'm part of a Latino Parent Association, and there is a word that has not been mentioned yet, and that is that SDP helps to reduce disparities.
Yes. Y quiero tomar la palabra del señor Lee, lo que está diciendo, que esas historias de superación, de cumplir sueños, metas, lo he visto con mis clientes. Tengo clientes que están en universidades, California State Fullerton, por ejemplo. Tengo clientes autismo no verbal que son youtubers, tienen gracias al programa su microempresa. Y yo voy a pedir de favor a las familias, compartir sus historias y mandárselos a todos ustedes, porque es muy importante que el Estado, los senadores, asambleístas sepan que estas historias son reales. Thank you.
And Mr. Lee, I'd like to take your word on that, and let me tell you too about sharing the stories, because I've seen it with my own clients, that several of them are in college, one of them in Cal State Fullerton, nonverbal clients who are YouTubers, others that have micro enterprises. So I'm gonna ask the families to share those stories, because the lawmakers need to know that all these stories are real.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to end the panel. Thank you so much for being here, Yang, Aaron, Viv, and Judy.
All right, thank you all for being here today. So a couple of quick things. You guys can stay here.